And we begin today with the end. Florida lawmakers wrapped up the 2-month session with a scorecard of wins for the governor's big priorities, some with an 11th hour strategy to get around the opposition.
Thanks to a reviving state economy and the American Rescue Plan, lawmakers also had money to spend. They passed a record $101 billion state budget. Two South Florida lawmakers join us now to talk about what that session accomplished and what it did not. State Senator Ana Maria Rodriguez is a Republican, represents Miami-Dade and Monroe counties. State Representative Bobby DuBose is a Democrat from Broward, co-leader of the House Democrats. To both of you, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Great to see you. If we can, let's begin with sort of, I think, a big picture question, and that is, what was the real notable achievement, if there was one, in this session of the legislature? Senator Rodriguez, what do you think it was?
Well, I think that one of the most notable achievements of this legislative session is record funding for environmental projects. As we know, Florida is an environmentally sensitive state all the way from the Panhandle down to the Florida Keys. And so I think that the fact that we have invested so much money into coral reef restoration, into sea level rise, into Everglades restoration to the tune of almost $700 million in that alone speaks volumes. The fact that we invested $20 million in Biscayne Bay restoration, as well as $20 million in the Florida Keys Stewardship Act. All of those projects are going to take our state into a much bit better and brighter course, even though, as we know, in the past, the governor has already made the environment a priority. But I think that that would be one of our most notable achievements for this legislative session.
I want you to know that Michael won bingo. That's exactly what Michael said before we went on the air. Bobby DuBose, what do you think?
I would take a broader approach, and I would say the budget, I mean, although there are areas obviously we could have gone further, but thanks to the current administration, President Biden, as it was noted, the American Rescue Plan helped us to achieve those things. But I think I would also add something that was probably key in my district was police reform, although it didn't go far enough, but at least it sets us in the right posture moving forward.
Yeah, Representative DuBose, on that police reform bill, which both the House and the Senate approved overwhelmingly, sent to the governor, he has given no indication about whether he is going to sign it or not. What do you think he's going to do?
I think he's going to sign it. I think a lot of his priorities were set up for his upcoming run. And so this is one that I think would definitely help that narrative.
Let's get into some bills, shall we? And I think one of the most controversial bills that came through was it's called Elections Administration. It was so controversial because it changes and tightens a lot of the rules around voting after what all agree is a Florida election that was flawless and a model for the nation. Ana Maria Rodriguez, Senator Rodriguez, I'm just going to launch this out there. There was a problem with elections in that there were shill candidates planted. One of them was in your race. It did not affect your win whatsoever. You won by far past the margin that shill candidate got. There is an amendment in that to prevent someone running from a shill changing his or her party to no party affiliation immediately before the election. That was the one amendment that was put in this bill. What do you think of this election bill that sort of tightens the rules around absentee ballot, vote by mail, who can be with people at the polls? There's some pretty stringent restrictions in there.
Yes, Glenna, that's a great point. I'm very thankful that through the hard work of our campaign, we did win by a 13-point margin. So as you said, the third-party candidate really did not have an impact in my particular race. But going back to the subject of the bill, I think the bill does a very good job at making it equitable for Floridians to vote in elections. It's important for people to have to show, for example, photo ID when they vote. And so many things that we do in our everyday lives, like boarding an airplane or purchasing alcohol or any number of things that we do, you do have to show a photo ID. So I think that's a step in the right direction. I also think that the fact that you would have to, order an absentee ballot, 2 years in advance. A lot can happen in 2 years. People move, unfortunately, some people pass away. A lot of things change. And so having an open request for an absentee ballot for such a long period of time is really not the most responsible way to handle that type of voting.
Excuse me, but Senator, a long period of time, 2 election cycles is the way it has been working for the last several years, and it seems to have worked pretty well. The election supervisors, in fact, like it because, they don't have to process a couple of 100,000 applications here in South Florida every year when people apply for an absentee ballot.
Yes, Michael, but I think in terms of having accuracy, the shorter time period is definitely the way to go. And so I fully support having a shorter time frame, even if it does require a little more effort and a little more work on the part of the local elections department. I think that having accurate election results supersedes anything else in terms of the election bill.
So, yeah. Representative DuBose, the opposition to this bill was right along party lines, and the Democrats and the opposition, the headline was, this is going to make it harder for people to vote. Some of the more onerous restrictions were stripped of the bill before it was passed in both the House and Senate. But give a couple of examples. Why do you think this makes it harder to vote? Shouldn't people have a fair playing field and do what they need to do responsibly to get their vote in? What are some specifics on that?
Absolutely. I just, want to lead out by saying, in the past, Florida is always, the state everyone's waiting on, and things that happen, and we end up being the joke around elections. In this last election, and my colleagues across the aisle and the governor are saying how great, and it's a gold standard. And then we come in and we start adding things that restrict, in my opinion, individuals' rights to vote. So limit the number of ballots that someone can turn in, extend this 150 feet in regards to being able to give people water and things of that nature.
But let me just, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's the bill says the 150-foot buffer is not about water, it's about campaigning. And that's in place right now, or was in place right now for 100 feet around. They just extended it to 150.
Exactly.
But that's about campaigning, not food and water.
But my point about that is it's always an extension of. So we had laws in place, and we had a very successful election process. So I'm just going to point out the things that I find to be very problematic. Also, before time, I want to talk about the limitation on the drop boxes. They're limited to the early voting time. They must be manned. Also, there's a $25,000 fine that's placed on our supervisor of elections if they're not compliant, which may put some of them in a posture of not having these drop boxes readily available. And then also a big piece of this legislation that most folks aren't talking about is the power grab that was put in there for the governor. And it relates to the resign to run law. And so right now as it stands, we have a lot of elections in Broward, and currently resign to run our county commissioners that are resigning, that would have a special election. But this bill just put language in there that allows the governor to make those appointments. Once again, we're taking away from people to vote for who they want to represent them.
Yeah. Senator Rodriguez, you represent proudly the Florida Keys in your district, Key West. As you know, last November, voters down there by about 60% approved a referendum that said that they wanted to limit the size and number of cruise ships that came into port. Well, your colleagues Republican colleagues in the legislature just reversed that and said that, in fact, Key West had no power to regulate the size or number of the cruise ships. That seems like just simply a slap in the face to the people of Key West. How do you see that?
Well, Michael, I just want to remind the viewers that through the committee process and on the floor of the Senate, I voted every single time against this bill. I think that it goes against home rule and the will of the voters of Key West that voted to limit the size of the ships. However, in terms of what my colleagues were thinking and what their perspective was, I think what they're trying to do, and the objective of the legislation, was to prevent this from happening in other ports around the state of Florida. As we all know, ports have interstate, international impact for that matter. And so limiting the size of ships or taking other measures that limit the amount of commerce that a port can do is something that would have a detrimental impact around the entire state and possibly to the entire country because of the number of ports that we have. But I was fully against this legislation.
Yeah, you were one of the few Republicans who voted no. To your point, this is a pretty broad bill, but in the local preemption department, it was pretty narrowly crafted to Key West Port. But we're going to take a quick break. Let's pick this discussion up when we come right back. Stay tuned. We are talking Tallahassee with Ana Maria Rodriguez, Senator from Miami-Dade, and Bobby DuBose, Representative from Broward. We just pick up on the Key West Port bill in sort of the bigger umbrella issue. This, Senator, was one of the bills that is preempting local control. There's a few more of those. From that perspective, how problematic is it that Tallahassee is taking control of local government?
So I think Tallahassee is very measured in when it gets involved in local affairs. I think my colleagues, as I was mentioning before the commercial break, what their intention was to basically create a framework so that other ports around the state of Florida do not take the same measures and take matters into their own hands to limit the size of the ships or the number of passengers and so on and so forth with regards to the 14 other ports around the state of Florida, as this could have a very negative financial impact on the commerce and the international trade that Florida represents in the United States.
Bobby DuBose, do you see it that way?
Well, on this one, I agree with my colleague as relates to this bill and, protecting home rule, but I disagree in her comment when she said that her colleagues are very measured as it relates to local government. Every session we see preemption, and it's a top priority. And every session they chip away at home rule and try and take away from the people that are the closest to the constituents. I served locally, and so did my colleague, and so we understand this. On this bill, we line up. However, in the explanation of her colleagues, I totally disagree. It's definitely something that they do every year to preempt local government.
Yeah, Representative DuBose, stay with us. I want to ask you and Senator Rodriguez about really the big headline bill. One of them that came out of the legislature was the so-called anti-rioting bill. And among other provisions here, it says that anybody who goes out in a demonstration and say you are, or that person is peaceful, does not break any laws, but somebody else does, you could all be arrested. You could be thrown in jail over the weekend or until a judge is available. It's not a bondable offense, and you would be facing a third-degree felony. Representative Bose, what's wrong with the anti-rioting law?
It's everything that's wrong. I feel like it's designed to have an attack on communities of color. Historically, this is the mechanism that we have used. First Amendment to peacefully protest. In fact, I think this is part of a larger narrative that we have, and it ties into the election bill as well. And so we've used this mechanism to get the right to vote and to actually get more rights in this country. So I think everything is wrong with that anti-protester bill.
Senator Rodriguez, the Senate analysis of that bill says that it does not contain the type of language that courts found violate free speech. I want to say that again just to be clear. An objective analysis of this bill, that it does not contain any language that would infringe upon free speech, protests, etc. So how, as a supporter of this bill, how do you allay the fears of your colleagues that something about what will happen in the future will really limit their ability to speak freely, to protest, to march. How do you allay those fears when you read this bill?
So I just want to reiterate the fact that, we support free speech, we support protests, and we want people to go out peacefully and feel that even when they are protesting against something that they do not agree with, that they will not be swept, along with the people who are, creating violent attacks and creating terror in our communities. HB 1 is a bill that upholds the rule of law in the state of Florida, and it's important for people that go out to protest to know that when they are protesting, that they can do so in a peaceful way, and that those who actually want to create chaos and destroy private property and take attacks on innocent people and their private property, those are the people that will be held accountable, and that's what this legislation is about.
Well, that all sounds good, but I mean, let's just face it. People and communities of color are disproportionately, handled differently when it comes to interaction with the police. So you tell me and my sons are out and someone else is doing something, you're going to guarantee that we're not going to get swept up in that. I don't buy that argument. I think the history of this country and how communities of color are policed says the counter to that statement.
If we can, before we run out of time, there are other bills we want to talk about, other things the legislature did. One of them was to, at the 11th hour, pass a ban on trans girls playing organized school sports. This was stuck, Senator Rodriguez, into a charter school bill, which had wide support, was going to pass. And now these trans girls who are often bullied and ridiculed and have societal issues anyway, now they won't be able to play sports. And in the course of this, I have to say, not one person, not one team, not one girl came forward and said, gee, I am put at a disadvantage by having a trans girl on my soccer team or, whatever team it was. What's your opinion about this ban?
Michael, I think that this bill is about empowering girls and actually creating a pathway for them to have equity in sports and all the different things that come from playing in sports, whether it's scholarships, whether it's the long-term benefits of being part of a team. As we know, trans girls have higher testosterone levels than regular girls. And so what it does is it says that the child that is playing in the sport has to play by the gender that's on their birth certificate. So these trans girls can play in co-ed sports. However, if it's an all-girl team, then it's something that they're just not going to be able to. And it is proven that a male that becomes a female will have a competitive advantage over an actual, a girl that's born as a girl. So I believe that this is something that was needed and is something that would actually empower the young women that compete so hard in their sports.
Can I just throw out there something that I don't think has gotten a lot of press with this amendment? This provides parameters for trans girls to play on girls' teams. It's not an outright ban, and it's difficult to talk about because of everyone wants to support these girls, trans girls, who live a very fragile mental health life in some respects. But there are parameters scientifically for transgender girls when they get to a testosterone level that is on a female scientific level to play. Bobby DuBose, did you know that?
Not in that much detail, but I will say in regards to this bill, I mean, these are children. I think Michael said, in regards to their mental health, I mean, just children in general in this stage in their lives, they're trying to figure things out. And, we're dealing with high level of suicide rates. And, we talk about trans girls, we got to talk about trans girls of color and how they're targeted and how they're murdered. I mean, this is something that's already there. I mean, these trans girls already participate. And so, again, we're looking for a solution where there's no problem. I mean, this is they've been participating and operating.
All right. Well, Representative Bobby DuBose, State Senator Ana Maria Rodriguez, great to have you both, and I'm glad you're glad to be home after 60 days in Tallahassee. We appreciate your time this
Yes,
morning.
sir.
Ditto.
Thank you.